This is Ranger Kidwell Ross, editor of worldsweeper.com and the director of the World Sweeping Association. I'm so pleased today to be speaking with two gentlemen. One is Phil Duncan, who is has long been involved with the World Sweeping Association's endorsed insurance program. But today we're emphasizing a gentleman named Reid Wellock. He is an attorney that, as he says, eats, sleeps, breathes cyber crime and cyber access. He's the president of Fifth Wall, and that's what they specialize in, is understanding, recognizing, and so forth, the different aspects and liabilities you might have with cybercrime. They have an insurance program that is designed specifically for that, and one of the important aspects here is that they have an entry-level program that is very cost effective for contractors, although municipalities are definitely subject to this sort of thing too. But I won't be the one getting into that. We'll have Reid do that. So, gentlemen, we have Phil Duncan's is unable to do video today, so we see his not quite smiling face in front of us, and then we'll have Reid will be our primary speaker. So if you would take it away, Reid, and thanks very much for providing the time to let everybody know about this.
Absolutely. And thank you, Ranger, for inviting me to be a part of this, and looking forward to digging into something I'm very passionate about. First of all, full disclosure, I'm actually not an attorney, but our office handles all things insurance. So my specialty is actually on cyber liability, and I spent the past 7 years doing just this, which is helping folks understand what is cyber exposure and helping identify it, and then helping find good solutions, predominantly in the insurance world. But there's also plenty of other risk mitigation you can do. But today we'll focus on the insurance piece, because it's a really important element, because for us, the standards is it's not a if, it's a when for all business owners that are living in any way, shape, or form in the digital era. So if you're doing email in your business, if you're moving funds electronically in any way, guess what? You have a legitimate cyber exposure. So after talking with Ranger and just getting a good understanding of what folks are doing and how the businesses are moving, there's a couple topics that I'd want to address. I think the first one, though, is just to get everyone on the same page of how do these breaches happen? And is this a legitimate concern? Short answer is yes, it is. If you are a business, and as I mentioned before, as simple as just utilizing email in your business operations, you have an exposure. But how would you end up getting breached? And there's plenty of ways, but really you can boil it down into two buckets. You can say that either there was a failure in technology, and that's a very broad term, but something that was supposed to work didn't work, or something that was supposed to be implemented was not, or it's human error. And human error is simple as just a click of a link. And that's what we're seeing. Over 90% of breaches today are a result of human error. So think of it as simple as someone internally at the office gets an email. They don't know that it's a nefarious email. It looks legitimate, and they click on it, and all of a sudden their operations are shut down. You can't do anything. You can't communicate. You can't do accounting. You can't do anything at all unless you pay a ransom. That's a quick example just to showcase it's really not that complicated for an event like this to happen. So Ranger, what I was hoping to hit is just kind of high level, what does it look like as far as the exposure as I understand it and the way I see it for your listeners and your viewers. And then just kind of go through also what I see is what's to come, and maybe some things that the industry as a whole maybe wanting to look at. Does that sound good? Great. So when you look at your exposure and you want to identify what does my cyber exposure look like, my recommendation is typically just put it in two buckets. And I try to keep this really simple. Data is one bucket. So do you have information that could be valuable to somebody else? And it doesn't have to be a lot of information. It can just be employee information. If you're collecting social security numbers, if you're doing direct deposits and you have bank account information, driver's license numbers, these are all it's called PII, personally identifiable pieces of information. Those are valuable. And so that's important to evaluate. The other is access. And access is a lot more complicated, but it's something that's often not looked at when someone's evaluating their exposure. And here's what I mean by it. As I understand it, a lot of contract sweepers today are working with, there's a couple different elements, but as far as, contract arrangements you have, whether it be with the municipality, with an airport, a property manager, whomever it may be, your exposure now ties to theirs. And it's a two-way street. So think about, let's use a municipality as an example. You're connected to that municipality, and you could be a lot easier of an entry point to attack that municipality than attacking the municipality directly. Here's a classic example. In 2013, Target was breached. Probably most of you remember, to some extent, it happened, but a lot don't understand really how it happened. And how it happened was, it was actually local here. I'm in the Pittsburgh area. An HVAC company that recently got the bid to work with a location near Harmerville here in Pittsburgh, a Target. And soon after, Target got breached. What ended up happening is a cyber criminal realized, I am not going to attack Target directly. They're way too sophisticated. They actually invested into their security, and it's a really, really hard challenge. But that HVAC company, that really small one, they're an easy target. And I can get them to click on an email. I can gain entry to them. And then I have trusted access to get into Target, right? I can assume them and slowly work my way using whatever techniques to get in. So my point is, when you look at your exposure, look at whom else you're tied to that you can provide access to, right? Also think about really simple things as far as, excuse me, I'm gonna drink of water. The transfer of funds, right? So if you are doing direct deposit, if you are invoicing or being invoiced, right, what does that look like? And we're seeing this a lot. We're seeing a lot of, it's funds transfer crime, right? We're seeing a lot of funds transfer fraud, but folks that are able to intercept those funds or go into your system and change information so money's rerouted to them directly. Well, that's a direct funds loss, meaning you just lost that money. It's gone. And so when we look at just the access piece, you can start to pull the thread there. So I really encourage listeners to just think more about who they're connected to, who they're tied to, and ask the question, what could my breach mean for them? And then we get into a third-party liability, right? Well, if I'm a good attorney and my client gets breached, but I find out it's actually a result of this company over here caused their breach. Well, my client's not responsible for these damages. We're going to go ahead and sue this person, this organization over here, because they're the ones responsible. So think about that. That's a real life example that's happening a lot too. It's the third party liability. So just some things to think about. And Ranger, anything you would want to add there? Or I can keep going all day long, but
No, I think you're doing a great job with that. And we've had a couple of examples that contractors have brought to me about phishing schemes that worked, where they received, the head of the company received an email, and in both of these instances, it was one of those, we've broken down and need money transferred right away to do the repair kind of thing. And they were fooled by it. And, it cost them $1,000 in one. I don't remember what the other one was. So that, that's a minor scheme. But I think, Reid, when you're talking about the connectability, and we're all connected in so many places these days, and your liability for who you happen to be connected with, I think that's very critical. So carry on.
Yeah. Well, it's the kind of questions that aren't they're not always being asked. And so it's a good way to just do a self-evaluation of saying, is this worth my time? I'm just here to say, yes, it is. Because there's a lot of examples out there. And think of this also, it's one thing to say, am I a target? Meaning, is someone looking at my business specifically? Really? Are they looking at my business and I'm the target? I'm worth their time? Well, yeah, actually, if I can get a quick $1,000 out of it, that's worth my time. It's a really easy thing to do. But even then, let's just pretend you're not targeted. A lot of these attacks, they have no clue who you are, right? And so think of it this way: a hacker used to use a certain skill set and a lot of time to dedicate into gaining entry into someone's network or getting, into somebody's email, whatever it may be. Well, nowadays, all I got to do is get someone to click on a link. So I can sit back in my chair, download, a couple million email addresses that I just got off the dark web, run a routine so I have an email that goes out to all of them. And it's a quick email. It just says, hey, haven't talked to you in a while. Do you mind looking at the attached? Thanks. Something like that. Well, I don't know who's on the other end, but as soon as someone clicks on that link, I'm going to go take a look because I just got entry. So think of it that way. And a good analogy would be, think of a hacker as walking down a street, just pulling on car handles. Okay. They're just looking for an open door, right? So they may be targeting, in a lot of instances they are, but they may literally have no clue who you are until they gain entry. And then they go, oh, I see looks like they got this number of employees, looks like they're sending money in this cadence, during these days of the month. Oh, it looks like they work with this municipality. Oh, that's a good target. Okay, now I got a plan. Now I'm going to go ahead and start and putting in the time and effort. So just think about that too. Another thing that I wanted to hit on is we're seeing a lot of contract requirements around cyber. So if you still are on the fence and saying, I don't know if this is enough of exposure that I should be concerned about. Well, I'm saying that you should be, but even then, what we're seeing a lot now, it's becoming standard as far as cyber is being required in a lot of contract service level agreements, right? And so I would not be surprised if soon you're going to start to see that with a lot of the organizations you're working with or for, specifically municipalities, but also if the larger, the more likely, if you're working with airports, they're going to want to make sure all their vendors and all their contractors are covering their own liability. Because remember, I mentioned that third-party liability, it's a two-way street. They don't want your problem to become their problem, right? But also, you could say, you don't want their problem to become your problem, right? So there's a little bit of an elevated position you could have too, is if you were looking at this and you legitimately feel compelled, like, look, I need to cover my exposure. It's one approach too, to look at those other organizations and ask them, hey, are you carrying cyber liability coverage? It's important for me and how I run my business, right? There's a certain level of sophistication of how I like to run my business to understand my exposure and the liability that I could possibly bear. And I need to see proof that you're carrying cyber. We're seeing that all across the board in many, many different industries. Sorry, Ranger, was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, Reid, there is something I'd like to add. We're talking about that level going up and say to a municipality, but I just thought of another direction. I've recently been working with looking at more investigation into what we call third-party vendors and some subsets of those. And what they do is they are collecting all of my contractor information. So there are even some now that want all of my social media links so they can go into a credit score for me. What's my online score going to be? But they have all of the information about my company at their location, and then I'm actually doing that. Let's say they might have a target as a client, and I'm working with them, and I'm going out and going to Target stores or Home Depots or wherever it is, but I'm actually working with billing and invoicing through that third-party entity. So those are people I would sure think that we'd all want to make sure that all of the third parties you work with do have cyber liability.
100%. Yeah, it's a really good point, Rangers. You start to recognize, and I keep saying it's a two-way street, right? Liability can go both ways. You're looking at yourself, you're looking at what you do, what's yours, what you're connected to, but then also get real cognizant of what else about yourself is already out there and what's being collected, what's being aggregated. The one thing I skipped over, I just want to make sure everyone is aware, because what we did say was, okay, how can this happen? But what would that actually mean? And there's a lot of different variations to a cyber breach. There's really no one cut and copy true way, this is how you're going to be impacted. But I like to grab some of the classics, and the classics that we're seeing a lot, especially for the examples I've given, is as simple as ransomware is. It's really effective. And if for anyone that's not familiar with ransomware, it's essentially you would click on something, open an attachment, whatever it may be, and once that malware gets into your system, it locks everything down. Your computer, all your softwares, hardware, everything. You can't access it. You can't run your business. And so the idea here is I'm going to hold your company. You cannot operationally move forward until you pay me ransom, until you pay me money. I'm a hacker, right? I mean, that it doesn't matter who you are, what you do. If you run a business, that's an instance where that's incredibly painful. And that is a potential put you out of business type of situation. You need to be able to move quickly, and you need to be able to move effectively. And a good cyber insurance policy isn't just paying for everything that you need to be doing, like hire an attorney, get forensics done, figure out what happened, how did they gain entry, all these things. What got impacted? Did anyone else get impacted? So it's not just paying for all these third parties to basically come in, but it's also laying out the path for you. So one thing I also like to highlight is, look, a good cyber policy isn't just supposed to make you whole and cover costs. It's also supposed to show you the path forward. So for anyone on this call going, okay, I get it. Maybe it is now, I'm going to be breached some point. Then the next question you got to ask yourself is, well, what do I do when I get breached? What are the things I'm supposed to be doing? And a good cyber policy is going to lay that road right in front of you. You'd immediately get connected with an attorney. You'd immediately get connected with someone that's going to quarterback everything. They're going to gather the information and they're going to say, all right, here's the next steps. Here's what we got to do. And guess what? It's all covered under the policy. We just want to get you from beginning to end, and so you can get back up and running. So the last thing I did want to highlight is we're talking about digital, and we're talking about everything that's electronic. There's a physical component here too. So a lot of folks don't realize that a cyber breach doesn't necessarily just have to be with digital information. It can be with physical information too. It can be a physical folder of information. So as I understand it, as we look at the variations of what contract sweepers are getting into, and some may actually be going on premises, right, and inside buildings. For anyone that has, an employee count where you're thinking about that, and it makes you a little nervous because, well, everyone's now I've got an extra exposure where folks are exposed to information. You could have an employee that could go rogue, and they themselves could perform a actual cyber breach, meaning they steal physical information. You hate to think of it, but we have in one of our programs, we have a couple different industries where that's the main exposure they're concerned about, because they've got a lot of personnel that really there's no real way to keep them on check, but they know it's kind of an inevitable situation. They've got full entry to physical data. So something else to think about just as you look at this, and it's not all digital, it's also physical. All right,
Reid,
you go ahead, Ranger.
I would think, for example, that janitorial would be a huge area where that would be a problem. And I know some contractors do handle janitorial, but or inside sweeping and those kind of things, or where you're going into locations and cleaning out empty offices and those kinds of things. So.
Yep, you'd be amazed at a lot of breaches that started in the trash. And I'm being serious. I mean, you get some good information that's thrown away. And a lot of companies don't have good policies and procedures when it comes to properly discarding of sensitive information. All right, so a lot of what I do is I can end up force feeding folks with information and they feel like they're drinking from a fire hose. So I don't want to do that. So I want to make sure I pause, and I'm covering a lot of the main topics I wanted to make sure we covered. But let me open it up real quick to both Phil and Rangers. Anything else that we want to make sure we walk through? I do a lot of the look, this is real. Here's why, and we gotta make sure you have a solution. So as long as we got mission accomplished there, is there anything else we would want to cover?
I think you hammered it pretty good, but it's better to be proactive and not like try to buy insurance when the house is burning down, because that insurance doesn't exist, and it also gets very expensive. So the sooner you make an investment in your business and protecting your business with a cyber policy, it's a lower barrier of entry, and you're going to get more coverage versus trying to get insurance after the fact. After you've had a loss and you've had a claim, you have to disclose that type of stuff. And now a policy, you're going to spend a ton more for a policy that you're most likely going to use. So it's like buying flood insurance if you live in the Florida Keys, or buying fire insurance if you live in California. It's not a matter of if, it's when it's going to happen.
You just triggered something for me, Phil. I'm glad you made that comment, because one thing I do want to highlight is, if you're listening and you're thinking, okay, I get it, now what? Well, traditionally with cyber insurance, there is, I don't want to say it's complicated, but it's an intrusive process in terms of, like, you got to fill out applications, you got to verify security controls are in place. It is insurance, right? But what we're talking about here is actually a lower limit. You still get $250,000 in coverage, but the barriers to entry are almost none. We've made it so you can get signed up and into the program within less than 2 minutes. So, and I want to make a fair statement that when you're looking at the exposure, you want to be looking at what does it mean to have a fully comprehensive policy and to actually have the full $1 million limit. But there's also reality is that you got to start somewhere, right? And for those that are listening and are finally kind of getting to understand, okay, this is something I need to take more seriously, this would be the best entry point for you to legitimately cover your liability here, while you're also might want to be exploring other options, either in parallel or further down the road.
And can we talk at all about what kinds of expenses, let's say $250,000 policy, is that a very expensive item to have? With I know we all get, I bet that now I get over 3,000 emails a day.
Yep.
Most of them, I have effective spam filters, and most of them go into my spam folder, but a significant amount don't. We host about, I don't know, 30 or so websites here of different contractors. And I get a notice at least once a month from one of the contractors where we host their site. And they have received a message that says, you owe this much money and here's why, and pay these folks, or here's the link to click on to keep your email going. We have a security issue with this email address, and to confirm that it's the correct person, then click on this link. And they send me these things. So there's a lot more of them that they don't send me. And there are a lot, of course, by far the majority of people out there listening to this, we don't host their website. And so they may or may not get hold of somebody right away, as they do here, that says, don't click on that. That's a phishing scheme, and here's how to tell, and, so forth. So, what kind of general expense are we looking at to be able to safeguard against this sort of thing? It's rampant.
Yeah, so the program we're talking about, we call our Cyber Peace of Mind program. Effectively, it's less than $30 a month. Yeah, and as I mentioned, it's the program. Yes, you get $250,000 of coverage. It's the program that is traditionally been viewed as this is the stepping stone, right? This is the way I can look. I need to move forward. I want to make sure I'm checking the box. And ultimately, you want to talk to somebody. My recommendation is you want to talk to somebody specifically about your business. If you have an agent, that's all the better, about what your exposure looks like and what an appropriate limit looks like. But when we look, generally speaking, at small businesses, this is a really good foundation to start with, and it's the most cost-effective way you could get into a more comprehensive program than what's generally out there that's attached to other lines of coverage. And I think that's one thing I want to make note, is that if you haven't had a conversation with your agent about cyber coverage, and maybe you have general liability coverage or you have other lines of coverage, you have an agent, but they haven't actually talked to you about cyber, but they say you have it, you probably don't. And what I mean by that is there's these endorsements that they'll put on other lines of coverage and it has the word cyber on it, right? And it's like, we're gonna put $20,000 or $25,000 of cyber liability coverage, and then they sublimit everything. And so at the end of the day, it's really worthless. I really want to make sure folks understand the difference, because if they're saying, well, I don't know if I have good coverage or not, if you haven't had the conversation, you likely have not or do not. So just a quick note to that.
I'll add to that too, if I can add to that, Reid,
Yeah.
is most insurance agents, unfortunately, aren't really cyber sophisticated.
True.
And I champion myself as a nerd, and Reid does as well. Like we live in computer world, and cyber is something that we've both been passionate about for a long time, since this coverage first started to come to the marketplace. So the good thing about the relationship here is we work with the World Sweepers and the World Sweeping Association, and as a no obligation, no charge at all, we have no problem talking through your risk and seeing if this peace of mind solution is sufficient, or if you need a broader policy. And the reason why we've partnered up with Fifth Wall Solutions is they're not just trying to sell you insurance; they are really focused on the education. In addition to providing very unique insurance packages, whether it's an entry base level policy that he talked about, this peace of mind policy that's around $30 a month, versus a very comprehensive solution. It's all about educating, educating the end user, educating the small business owner, and a component that Fifth Wall Solutions offers, in addition to the insurance piece, is an education piece. So they provide a really cool tool set that will allow your employees to go through proper training, so they don't fall for these phishing schemes and these spear phishing, and they know how to protect their personal identifiable information. So Fifth Wall is not just is not just a quote unquote insurance agent. They are a cyber solution partner. And as Reid said, when that breach happens, it's the worst thing that you can imagine. And if you don't know what to do, your business you can lose your business. And just having experts on the other line with a 24-hour hotline that you could call into, and they give you a roadmap on how to not only stop the breach, but also come up with a plan to get back in business, because that's their core mission. Is first, let's stop what we're doing, let's figure out what happened, but while we're doing that, you got to get back to business. You still need to run your company, and Fifth Wall has a really good triage center that allows that to happen. So you're not just buying an insurance policy, you're basically getting a back office tech team that's going to help you get back to where you were and get back to business while you're figuring out what happened.
Yeah, and let me weigh in on that a little bit. Our audience is, and I include myself in this, relatively unsophisticated in this area. And we've seen, we've all heard about a lot of different breaches, and you might think it's rampant, and so, boy, it makes sense. But at the same time, we're at the very beginning of this. It's becoming a good way they have found to make money. I'll go back to the sort of the beginning of the internet. I was a consultant with Schwartz Industries and the Schwartz family at the time, and doing brochures and those kinds of things. And I because I was more involved with computers, I went to Mark Schwartz and said, have you heard of the internet? And he said, yeah, I think I've heard a little something about that. I said, well, how about websites? You know about those? Well, no, I had never heard of those. And I said, well, I think I'm bringing you late to the game here, because I understand these are things that businesses are having. And there's over 100,000 of them already out in the world. So I think we may be late, but I'm thinking we should do one. Well, look where we are today in the billions of websites around the world. It's absolutely ubiquitous and so forth. But unless you're involved in that stream from the beginning, and as both Phil and Reid are talking about here, you have basic knowledge, you have basic coverage, and you have the outlines of what you need to do in order to minimize your exposures, then you could be in real trouble. And for it seems to me, for under $500 a year, to forestall something that can cost you your business, that's pretty inexpensive. So I'm in favor and a fan of this for businesses. And I've certainly seen, because I'm sort of the interface between computers and real world services in the sweeping industry, look at it, investigate it, and make a decision for yourself. Don't make it a decision of omission just because you haven't taken the time to make a real valid decision on it. Soapbox over.
So I think the only other thing I want to cover is just the urgency. And I think this is something that hopefully we've provided some good information around. And I think when I say urgency is that this is something that to me is real as fire. It's tangible, it's real. I see the consequences. We see it every single day. I know it's not innate for everyone to understand the intricacies of cyber and what it means, but at the very least, there should be a sense of urgency to start investigating the reality of this as an exposure for your business. And then ultimately make sure that you are handling your risk appropriately. And insurance is one of the ways that you want to make sure you're ensuring that this is not a put you out of business type of situation. So that's where I'll step off of my soapbox, Ranger, and I think that's where I'll leave it.
Well, thank you very much, Phil and Reid, both. For Phil for setting this up, Reid for your very effective and knowledgeable coverage of this. We've been talking to Reid Wellock of Fifth Wall Solutions, and it sounds to me like a solution that very well should be a part of your business. Hard to believe it shouldn't, in fact. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.